Hello, everyone. We're back. Oh, another apologies actually, because we were supposed to do this episode last week, but there was a heart attack in my family that I had to provide emergency transportation for. So that's been that, and then the aftermath has been my week. So we were supposed to do this last week, but we're doing it on Good Friday, and I think that was also sort of fitting considering just how dang Catholic Tolkien was. We're looking at the Silmarillion. Not the whole thing. We're looking at the Ainur Lindale, the music of the Ainur, the very beginning part of the Silmarillion, and also kind of the just it's the sort of in the beginning creation narrative of Tolkien's world of Arda. So this episode will continue our Tolkien series, and we're going to continue with that. That's the plan. But also, Elliott and I have been kicking around plans for doing episodes on different creation myths, in no particular order, as we wander where we want to on this channel. But so I thought, well, this is a perfect crossover, right? It's a creation myth, and it's a creation myth that's from Tolkien. But yeah, hopefully more creation myths to come. So we're starting with Silmarillion, the music of the Ainur. One of my, I think I've said this before, the Silmarillion is my favorite of Tolkien's fictional works. It's actually not On Fairy Stories is my favorite thing he ever wrote, I think, which we've covered before on this channel, although with a different co-host. Elliott, we should maybe, if you're down for it, I think On Fairy Stories would be fun to redo with you now that you're on board, because I think you'd get a lot out of it. But in terms of Tolkien's fictional work, Silmarillion is my favorite. And obviously we should say that Christopher Tolkien had a huge part in making the Silmarillion what it is today. Obviously, it's the editor, right? Just like a great film, right? There's the director, and then there's the editor, and the editor kind of makes the film. And that's my understanding for the Silmarillion, is that the structure, right? The content is J.R.R. and the structure is, at least to a certain extent, Christopher, and who has, again, in the past couple years passed away. So we remember Christopher Tolkien as well. What just an awesome editor. I mean, holy crap. We really wouldn't have the access to Tolkien's works that we have today were it not for Christopher. So,
Well, and of course the new Lord of the Rings stuff, just makes us appreciate even more folks like Christopher Tolkien,
yes.
who were faithful editors, not hacks.
Yes, not
trying to cash in.
Yes, not thieves and usurpers, to quote, or to at least to paraphrase Treebeard. Yeah. We like true people, true to the spirit of the world. Elliott, I just launched into talking. Apologies. It's the stress of the week, I guess. I hope you're doing well. It sounds like you've had a better week than I've been having, and I'm happy for that. It's never fun when you have to rush a loved one to the emergency room. So I hope you're doing well. Sounds like you're doing well. It's good.
Yep, absolutely, 100%.
It's Good Friday, so it's Good Friday, and I'm leaning into the horror of Holy Week with Liquid Death. So that's that's my got that, and yeah. So let's just jump in. Otherwise, we'll just keep doing a Midwest goodbye for 2 hours. So, Elliott, had you read Silmarillion before?
No, I have watched a few CGP Grey videos that have to do with the Silmarillion, and I'm vaguely aware of the Silmarillion and blah blah blah, all that stuff.
But you never actually sat down.
Correct.
Yeah, and again, we've just started. This is just the very beginning. If people, if you don't know what the Silmarillion is, it is essentially the early history of Middle Earth, like from the beginning, from even before there is a physical Middle Earth. And yeah, I mean, I would recommend, if you're at all interested, if you love Lord of the Rings and you haven't made the leap to the Silmarillion, absolutely no judgment or shame, because it is not easy to read. No reason to not read it, but it is not, it is a collection of stories, because it's, again, put together by Christopher Tolkien posthumously. And it's it is part of the same narrative, and there's a narrative arc, but it was not composed as like a novel the same way that like Lord of the Rings was, or The Hobbit, definitely, right? So and in it, in the Hobbit is kind of is interesting in that it's set in the same world, but it is really more of a children or young adult children's. It has a lot of young adult and children's kind of literature qualities to it. Lord of the Rings is definitely more adult, but is more of a novel. Well, it is a novel. The Silmarillion is kind of like an ancient record of great feats. And it's cool in the Silmarillion because you can, obviously these elements are very present in both The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, of course, but the Silmarillion not only gives you an explanation for, like, why is it that Middle Earth is this way? It gives you explanations for a lot of that, for a vast majority of those reasons, like we're Tolkien thought of and created. So just I can't imagine keeping track of this stuff, but he could. But also in the Silmarillion, from a stylistic perspective, you get to see Tolkien really lean into, in terms of like how he's writing, into the style, almost into like epic narrative, the stuff that he's really leaning into the style of stuff that he would study academically. So like Norse myth, Anglo-Saxon poetry, any myths that he was looking at really leans into that here, because it's not a story, like it's not a wonderful beloved story about a hobbit who leaves the Shire and has an adventure with a dragon, right? It's about like, this is how like Ilúvatar, the god of Middle Earth, created everything. So it's kind of it's really more like Genesis, and there's stylistically it's also more like it's a creation narrative, and it goes deep and hard all the way. So again, if that sounds scary, but if you're not used to reading stuff like that, because most people don't necessarily like go in for that. I recognize that this channel is a little bit spectrumy. We spurg out a bit on this kind of stuff. That's totally fine. That's our jam. If you're not into that, I still challenge you to try reading, or to read. Keep pushing through the Silmarillion. The first time I read it, it was difficult. There is a lot of names. There's a lot of dates. It takes place over thousands of years. And there's no shame in looking that stuff up. I will say, I've read it multiple times. Every time I read it, I always have to go and like onto like Tolkien Gateway is a good website, and just to cross-reference names and dates, because there's a lot of those. It is a history, and Tolkien treats it as such. But I would really challenge everyone to read it. It is so good, and it is so cool, and it's quite dense. But I figured, why not start in the beginning? Again, creation myths, the thing we're starting to look at on the channel. But also the very first section is a relatively small section of the book, the music of the Ainur, the Ainur Lindale. So Elliott, you had sort of had some exposure to the lore, the deep lore before, but hadn't actually sat down to read it, because you have a life and a career and things that I'm attempting to get. So I'm just curious, like what's your, like, you've read Tolkien before, but you've read Lord of the Rings, right? That's and The Hobbit. What's your take, like, even just from the little bit that we read for this, the music of the Ainur? I'm just curious, like, what you thought as general. We could either go general to broad, general to specific, or specific to general, but I just kind of pass it to you. Like, what'd you think?
Yeah, no, I think I'll go ahead, and I think I'm happy to start general, because that's how Tolkien started
In the beginning. Yeah.
Right in the beginning. It's interesting because I would say, as you were trying to sell people who are into narrative fiction, right, or stories, this is, I think, what somebody might call a meta narrative, maybe, potentially, right? It's something that helps to frame and buttress and support the narrative, is one thing. I like to think about books like this is kind of, I find a lot of people, consider like Star Trek, right? Star Trek was loved by a lot of people because it was essentially unphilosopher's philosophy, right? Like, people could bring up canonical Star Trek episodes and philosophize about them, and the same universe supported
Dharma Kenjalada Tanagra. Yeah.
Right. And the same universe also supports like kind of uh, uh, engineering theory nerds of like, well, theoretically, obviously we know some of this is impossible, but how is it that? Or it also supports like lore masters, like, oh, well, on episode blah, they did the thing with the other thing, and that's why this, right? Like, so all three of those functions are fulfilled by the Star Trek universe because it's very well fleshed out and everybody can engage richly in these three categories and be able to talk about it. And that's really great. And so if you're not like a hardcore philosophy person or like a hardcore linguist or whatever, or a history, I think that this is a really great place to start because if you already love the Lord of the Rings, you can get like what I see in this first 7 pages that we've read. I see a lot of really deep, awesome themes that are like theological and like deeper philosophical and mythological, right? And so if
And
you're
literal
super
themes.
familiar, you're
Literal.
right. Right, exactly, right. So if you're familiar, if you love the Lord of the Rings and you kind of always wish you could have got into philosophy or something like this is a great way to engage in that, right? Or to like read this myth and this creation story and then go back and read Genesis or go read Gilgamesh or go read some of these other legendariums because this is a legendary story to me, right? And I think you'll get those intuitively better, right?
Yeah. Yeah, because Tolkien is, drawing inspiration from a lot of different sources and then also just doing his own thing, right? This is Tolkien's mythopoeia, right? His mythic poetic creation, which we've talked a little bit on the show in a previous episode about on fairy stories, but Elliott, you and I should redo that episode because Tolkien gets into his philosophy of that. But yeah, Tolkien's idea that if people don't know, right, Tolkien starts to create languages. He starts to create languages, specifically Elvish languages, and then is quickly hit by the realization that in order to really know what any of these words mean and how they're supposed to sound and how they're supposed to change over time, I need to know who speaks these languages. Okay, they're elves. Well, what does that mean? And so obviously this is the culmination of that life's work, but Tolkien creates, he was always very clear that the creation, the world building, the literal creation of the world comes out of a necessity to ground his languages, and the emphasis on, like you said, so there's a lot of just assumed, or not assumed, but implied philosophy there, that language is the ground of meaning, and that we, with language comes the ability to create stories, aka myths, that have meaning, and this is, we transmit meaning, aka myth, via language, and that connected with language is music, right? That music is a way of expressing yourself or expressing oneself, and creating meaning, and it's great because in some slight spoilers here, so read the Silmarillion, but in the creation narrative of Arda, of Middle Earth, the world is created through music, or at least planned out. The plan of creation is done through music, which is really cool. There's doubtless there's some creation narrative out there that I'm unaware of, that has music as as like the creative force. But it's one of the things I love the most about the Silmarillion is it's not that it's all musical, but that the grounding, the plan, Eru Ilúvatar, the god of the main god, well, really the only god of the world, he's planned out through music, and that he creates the Ainur, which are kind of like angels, I guess you'd say, and then he creates them, and that they work together. Well, spoiler, not always together, but the idea is that they work together in harmony, like a literal harmony, and that through the singing and creation of music, the plan for like physical creation is born. I just think it's so pretty. Elliott, you're somebody who has like an actual background in music. I don't. I just appreciate music. I don't create it. I'm really curious what your takeaways from that, because it's creation through music, music through creation, all this kind of stuff. Like, I want your reaction to that, because that's one of the reasons why I was so excited to I know I technically assigned you some reading, but I was like, there's lots of music in it. I think you'll like it. So would, like, as somebody with a musical background, I'm really curious. Talk about that, like how Tolkien uses music in the story here.
It's funny because I can't remember if we talked about this on the podcast or off the podcast, but like I think the basically the first page that I read reminded me of this Eric Whitacre piece that I've sung in choirs and is just a total like mainstay in modern choral music now. Eric Whitacre is possibly one of the most famous living composers for choral music. Like, basically there hasn't been a person to come around and really light the choral world on fire single-handedly for a couple hundred years. And,
Okay. Since Allegri or something like that.
Well, yeah, like basically since people who have been long forgotten hymn makers, like I know that you're not necessarily a fan of Wesley.
Don't say Wesley. Oh.
I know you're not a fan of Wesley, but realistically speaking, I mean, his hymns are in like everybody's hymn books.
No, I mean us Lutherans, we got the Wesleyan hymns too. Although you can always tell when it's a Wesleyan hymn and a Lutheran hymn, they're very different. You can actually totally tell.
No, for sure. Well,
9 times out of 10, I can tell when it's a Wesleyan hymn, because there's I'm a total chud when it comes to singing, and I don't understand musical theory, but I'm relatively intelligent, I like to think, and I can tell when it's a Wesleyan hymn, like a Wesley hymn, because you jump, I guess, keys or octaves so much that you're like, no untrained singer could ever sing this. And as a Lutheran, where the Lutheran hymns are like, a mighty fortress is our God. It's like bum 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 bum, and it's like for everyday people. Here we sing this song, like, and then it's like the Wesleyan hymns, like. So sorry for the rant, but you triggered me, because the Wesleyan hymns, man, it's just
100%.
Sorry, now I got to be I got to do the Lutheran thing. I got to say the nice thing. They're very pretty. They're very pretty hymns that are difficult for normal people to sing. But yeah. So
No,
Wesley
for sure.
Is one of the last big choral people. I interrupted.
Well, yeah. Well, no, and of course, the reason why I invoke him is that there's a lot of folks around that era who were cranking out hymns that we now continue to sing to this day that seem to have spilled out of the ether, but they came from the 1800s, all of them. Like every single Christian hymn that anybody thinks of as a quote unquote hymn was written in the 17 and 1800s, full stop, right?
Yeah,
like,
and there's some it's just me, modern hymns don't tend to be so great.
No, they're very bad. They're trash. So you can feel the modernism in modern hymns, in that literally, and this is all very
feel the
thoughtful,
cringe.
guys. The soul has been sucked out of the music, right? Like completely sucked out. And what's interesting about a lot of these hymns that are modern is that they're usually unison, and they're usually kind of discordant, as if they're
Elcor is at work.
They're not like, so I really appreciated this, obviously, as a choral person. The other thing I would say as a background to Tolkien is that I believe he is kind of Northern English, right?
Was it West Midlands? Well, his family originates from West Midlands, so that's
West
on the
Midlands.
border area with Wales, and so
yep.
historically there was like in the Middle Ages, there was a relative amount of of like cultural contact, maybe not necessarily always bilingualism, but cultural contact with Wales. This is part of the reason why I'm going to reference this, because we've talked about it on the channel before with Fred, yes, or was it Fred, or was it, I can't remember, or was it Clark? We talked about it on the channel before, one of those two fine gentlemen. We talked about Sir Gawain. And one of the reasons why Tolkien was so enamored by the Sir Gawain and the Green Knight story is because it's from the West Midlands, and that was sort of where part of his family originated from. So he felt great affinity with the story and the language of the poem. It's a great poem. Check out that video. Maybe I'll link to it.
So it's pretty
West
funny.
Midlands, it's not quite north, but I mean it's definitely not like London.
No. I
Yeah.
prefer him not to be from the north, actually. And it's one of the. It's funny because in math we like to say that uh, that you know that you have found the pattern when you predict when you can when you find a mistake. So you are given a pattern, you know that you found the pattern when you're like, hey, I feel like this is a mistake, and the other person's like, yeah, you're right, it doesn't fit the pattern, right? So I guessed, oh, he's from the North Highlands. You're like, actually, he's from the border of Wales. I'm like, bam.
Well,
Every
his
good
family,
music comes from Wales,
right,
right?
his family. Yeah, he felt
Well,
great. Yeah,
that's fair. That's fair.
Tolkien's from South Africa. He's from Bloemfontein, but he's not South African. He was just born there. But yeah, so
Oh, South Africa has some good hymns too,
but
but
he
basically,
left when
like,
he was so young when they left that he's not. I mean,
sure.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
that enculturating. So here's the thing: is that I think here's my hypothesis: is that all of the best hymns, period, come from Wales,
As
and
somebody
Welsh
who has some Welsh,
has some
yeah,
of the best
yeah.
singing, right? Period, right? Like it's sort of like go look up the Welsh national anthem, and if you are not stirred to go like pick up a chopstick or fork or whatever is around you and go like stab the English in the face, I don't know what's wrong with you, right? Like this song is just like you're like, yeah, this is the land of my fathers since time immemorial, and I'm not even fucking from Wales, right? Like, and a lot of Welsh hymns, it's kind of like,
Well,
uh,
very Methodist, right? Very. There's the Wesleyan thing too, right? Like in Wales, right?
mhm.
There's the singing emphasis goes probably the religious affiliation, at least traditional. One of the main traditional religious affiliations of the region probably also works together hand in hand with the music. I'm guessing.
Well, probably, but
Yeah.
I think the Welsh singing is just like, I
Predates.
think that there are things about people and singing that you can that come out, right. And I think the Welsh, you can see the kind of love and cherishing of song and singing together and breathing together,
But
and
only 6
making
feet
joyous
apart with a
noises.
mask, with a diaper over your face. That's the only way you can
Well,
sing.
and see, this is a problem, right? Because modern music, or modern singing or approaches to singing has kind of that attitude of like, oh, I have to be perfect, I have to do everything right, and then songs will happen. But it's like, nah, man, you just need to. And this is what's interesting, right? So if we go to the text here, and there will be spoilers a little bit here and there, but go read the book, bruh. Like,
Yeah.
it's interesting because if you listen to so here's a great one, is the best loved English hymns, or the best of loved English Christmas carols, right? um, so an example of that is Once in Royal David City by the King's College Choir, right? And it starts out with a soloist, and everybody is in the choir listening to that soloist, waiting for their cue to come in, and then everybody joins the behind the soloist, right, to after they're done with their thing. And this is exactly what we start out with a small group singing while everybody else listens, and they continue to go and to go and to go. And Ilúvatar is Arrow and Ilúvatar, right? Fills the position of the choir conductor, right? So he himself doesn't appear to be singing, I think. He is, and he spake
Well,
to them. Yes.
he creates themes. He creates themes ex nihilo, and then he also weaves together themes that the Ainur have created in a new way.
So he gives them a ditty, and then they riff off the ditty, so to speak,
Something
right?
like that, yeah.
Right.
And one of the big themes, again, lots of stupid music puns. One of the big themes that of just this very beginning part of the Silmarillion that you find throughout all of Tolkien, all of the Lord of the Rings and adjacent stories, is that, right, that there is no, you cannot create anything that does not have its utmost source in the creator, which is not you, right? Which is, well, Eru Ilúvatar, or God. Now it can be perverted, it can be twisted, it can be bent, it can be hollowed out. All those things can happen. Tragically, spoiler: there is a fall narrative. In Tolkien was very clear about you can't have a story without a fall. So there's a fall. But even the most egregious wound that creation can suffer, still inside that finds it's a wounded good thing. It's a perverted good thing. Evil becomes is what, evil is just is shifted good. And this is obviously a very strong theme in Tolkien's work. Obviously, he's not just getting this from him. This is heavily influenced and finds its source in his strong Catholic belief. And Tolkien was a huge fan of Boethius, and Boethius obviously was much loved by, despite being Roman, was much loved by the Anglo-Saxons, and obviously Tolkien being an Anglo-Saxonist, lots of Boethianism, or Boethian elements here. So yeah, but Ero Ilúvatar can create out of nowhere, and then he gives the Ainur a ditty, as you say, and then they start riffing. Now, what they do with it has different outcomes. So anyhow, keep going.
And I will take the liberty to be cringe right here and read a little passage, but I will read it.
Yeah, a live reading. It's only 4 hours long, and then please make sure to do our Substack. There is no Substack. There's no subscription. This is all for free. Yeah.
No, of course. Yeah, it's going to be a live reading that we interrupt every halfway
now,
through a sentence.
Elliott,
to give a brain dead take.
Elliott, this is really going to piss the libs off, but I'm going to say that.
Yeah, right.
Just read. Read. Yeah.
I don't even know what this word is. I'm like, oh, okay, you're really well read, aren't you? Then anyway, regardless. Point being is, I'm not a snob, but goddamn, don't be an intellectual. But for a long while, they, meaning the Einar, the angel dudes, they sang only each one. But for a long while, they sang only each alone, or but a few together, while the rest hearkened. For each comprehended only that part of the mind of Ilúvatar from which he came, and in the understanding of their brethren they grew but slowly. Yet ever as they listened, they came to deeper understanding and increased in unison and harmony. So the things that I love about this right here, just at this moment, is that the idea here is that each Einar represents a kind of section, an embodied section of the mind of Ero Ilúvatar, right? Which I think is who is the one. I think this is fantastic. It's a beautiful example of particularization from like abstraction, right? An embodiment, a concretization, right? So making something concrete from something abstract. So Ero Ilúvatar is already, a singular being, but he's complex in that he is capable of, particularizing himself into these embodied beings that are themselves embodiable, right? Like, so it's not like they're degenerate, right? They're their own thing. And then what happens is they come and they pairwise sing, or they individually sing and they listen. So what they do is they kind of create what is sometimes called Indra's net in Hinduism, right? Where each parts of the whole are reflecting on each other, and kind of giving each other better understandings. And then as they go, they increase in unison, right? So they all learn how to sing the same tune and in harmony, which a harmony is, musically speaking, ratios, so differences in pitch that sound great together, essentially, is what you want to think about a harmony as. So everybody could sing the same note. That's not very difficult, but finding notes that sound nice together, those are mathematically determined, right? Yep. Like there's pretty much, music is kind of, right. No, well, music is interesting, right? Because it's kind of the only art form that is completely, it kind of is the only one that gives the game away on artists who say that art, that aesthetics are purely subjective, because it is somewhat true that the beauty is in the eye of the beholder. The nice thing about our ears is that our ears are significantly harsher critics than our eyes are.
At least when it comes to music.
No, well, especially when it comes to music.
Well, because
right?
I guess I'm just to wave the flag of my camp, because you can have a beautiful poem that is, I contend that poetry isn't good unless it's read aloud. And you can have a beautiful poem that is misread and ruined. And you can have
absolutely.
sometimes you can have a crappy poem that's read really well. So yes. I guess but with music is different. Music is very harsh, because if you F it up, it will if you like so badly screw it up, like in its, as you would say, ratios, it gets ratioed and it gets ruined,
Mhm,
and it's like
mhm.
ends up sounding like, mumble rap. What?
Well, so
Gucci Gang. You just say Gucci Gang 12,000 times and it's a song, apparently. So
well, and this is where it's interesting, right? Is because because so it's I could see how people might think that musically speaking, like Elliott, come on, it's got to have a wide variety of different acceptable tunes, and it's like, actually, no, dude. Like, if you compare the number of different hues that make meaningful pictures. I'm not even saying pictures you like. I'm saying pictures that are meaningful and not just equivalent to static noise. That is hugely more. That's way more pictures than there are musical chords that sound like music and not just noise, right?
yeah,
Like, it is so easy to create noise. Music is so structured that, like, music theory, like, is incredibly narrow compared to other art theories. And that's not to knock on anything else, but there's a reason, in my opinion, why the ancients studied music as part of their fundamental cosmology, along so
music of the
the quadru
spheres.
and the music of the spheres, right? So you're supposed to learn geometry and arithmetic, and then astronomy and music. And music, kind of, you're like, what does that have to do with anything? Like, how is that on par with geometry and arithmetic, and then astronomy and music? Like, why? And it's like, well, dude, because the ancient Greeks saw a correspondence, in my opinion, between music and the heavens. I mean, because of the music of the spheres, right? And I think that you know there's a reason why it's a heavenly choir in my mind, right? And it's
Right.
exactly this reason. And of course, this notion goes way further back than Tolkien. And there's a reason why heaven is evoked as people singing together forever,
Well,
right?
and the interesting thing, sort of, this not this just is I can just to kind of chime in just a little bit, pun
Yeah,
intended.
go ahead.
There's just gonna be a lot of bad puns.
They're so easy here.
They're so easy. Well, after the techno crazy one of last time, I was proud of that one. I gotta keep my standard going. No, but there are they're evolutionary biologists. I hate to medicalize this. I'm not, but I'm just saying there's evolutionary biologists who, and I think they make a pretty good argument. I am not an evolutionary biologist, but I am a part-time linguist. I do some linguistics, and there is a pretty decently backed up theory that early humans slash that the in-between period, where, and it's an in-between period of thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years, that early humans or probably sang before they started talking.
Mhm.
And so that now we don't mean like singing, a 4-part harmony and like, and all those things that we now think of in music, but we mean like, animals sing, and they
Yeah.
sing for communication purposes. And so, and I mean, great apes make noises and make vocalizations that have meaning, but there's an idea that like, that earlier stages of humans would have sung before they started really talking. And it is a theory. It's really hard to prove, and I'm not qualified enough to prove it. But even on a myth, whether or not it's objectively true on a mythic level, it really jives with your innate understanding of, like, at least mine, of like what it is to be a human and what it is to express yourself. Because even if you don't have the words to say, or even if you can't necessarily say exactly what you mean, or maybe you can still, like, there's something so, like, little kids pick up on music, right? Music is really deep inside humans, and it is, there's all this mathematical grounding to it as well, that so yeah, I mean, I'm totally open to that idea. And I think there's a whole book about it, and they made a pretty good argument that, like, singing is even older than language. And so if that's true, which I think there's a pretty good argument for it, then music is even more foundational to being a human than maybe even language. Or I would say,
Mhm.
perhaps language rides a little bit on the underlying form, to get very Platonic, of music.
And I don't even think that that is it's not even vaguely crazy of a statement, because here's the thing: is that every single language has no language is fully atonal,
Yeah,
right? Except for the
right.
click languages,
Well,
right?
but
Every
even but even click languages. So every single human language has vowels, because you can't speak without
yeah,
vowels.
yes.
Yes, somebody's going to go in the chat like, you understand that the Tuareg people have words that don't have vowels, and I go, yeah, I know, thanks, but they still have vowels. There's some words that don't have vowels, but they have many other words with many vowels. Don't try to tell me that the Bedouin don't speak with vowels. That's a lie that I hear online.
Really?
Oh yeah, there's
People,
sorry, I'm heading them off at the pass, because there's people like, I'm like, actually, you're wrong.
wait, the
Uh,
Bedouins don't have vowels?
yeah, or no, was it not Bedouin? Sorry, apologies. It was Tuareg. It was Tuareg. The idea, not Bedouins, but Tuareg. The idea is that the Tuareg languages of North Africa don't have vowels, and that's a wrong statement. Please, if you ever hear that, ignore that. They don't know what they're talking about. Every single human language has a vowel, and as Mitch would tell you, uh, Mitch is a phonetician who was on the show frequently. Um, there's different pitches associated with different vowels when you just have the pure vowel sound, but when you put it together in a word that has the sound system of a language working behind it, the phonology, yeah, you get in different intonational patterns, different pitches. Whether or not your language is objectively tonal or not, you still have intonation. Like, and it's just, sorry, this is just to make this point really really clear. Like, you'll hear sometimes, well, English isn't a tonal language, and I am always quick to go,
And
well,
it's like, that's a lie.
we don't
Like,
use tones to distinguish syllables from each
yes.
other, but we totally use intonation to mark things like surprise, disgust, question, funny anecdote. I'm doing it right now. There is no atonal language, as you quite rightly say. It just doesn't work. And so even in languages, such as English, that don't have phonemic tone, um, still lots of tone. There's still and wouldn't you know it, that different languages, and even, you can go on a smaller level, different dialects of different languages have very different intonational patterns. This is one of the main distinguishing features between different English dialects. So if you go to England, or you go to Scotland, or you go to different places in England, different places in Scotland, in Wales, in Ireland, right, anywhere, there's different intonational patterns. And to say that that's not in some senses musical is, I agree, is just, it's not accurate. Like, of course there's a structure, and wouldn't you know it, different languages or different dialects of different languages, it's not just like random tone, it's not just random tone differences. There is a structure behind it. There's different structures in different dialects and in different languages, but it's not just like purely random, right? It's not just like it's not like two people in the same family who've lived in the same area and speak the same language just like sound radically different. Of course, we all sound different from each other, and we all have our own sort of idiomatic ways of talking. But like, you don't have to be a linguist to notice that people in one family tend to sound the same. I'm assuming you've noticed this, Elliott. Like, most people pick up on this, right? Like, particularly like, like if you get like, if you've ever like been over to somebody's house where you're the only non-family member, like they invite you over, right, and everyone's just like, particularly if it's like an intergenerational setting and everyone's having a good time, you quickly, and they could be, in this case, like from America and be English speakers, but you pick up that like, oh, like they have the same ways of talking. It's just, it's so, this is, again, I know I'm gushing, but I'm just saying that like, it's so intuitively correct that to say that yeah, that like, that the idea that there's not a musicality to language in general is just preposterous to me, and I think you'd agree. So
No, yeah,
yeah.
obviously, I completely agree. I also would point out that the fun sort of counter uh the fun exercise to do, right? Obviously, nobody's going to seriously be able to refute this, but it's like, it's a fun exercise to go and try to speak atonally, right? And again, you need to not vary your pitch at all, right? So if you have a keyboard or a piano, or go online and look up the YouTube videos, which is like sine wave blah blah hertz or whatever, right? Try to keep your voice at that same tone for an entire sentence. And it's actually fun to do because it is very, very difficult to do.
Yeah.
It is incredibly hard thing to do. It's like you actually have to be quite a skilled musician to do that sort of
I
thing.
can't do it.
You know, and it's interesting because if you do this with you and a friend, and one of you manages to pull it off slightly better than the other, notice how you hear them, and notice that it is almost hard to even hear what they're saying, because you get so much meaning from the cadence in which you speak. And the next thing is to also vary the cadence, right? So to try to hit one syllable per beat. So you're trying to speak in like all caps monophase font, right? And but visually speaking, right? If I had Courier New, like the typewriter font, and I all capsed it, and I spaced out all the letters equally spaced with no spaces, that's kind of hard to read, man. And that's very similar to what speaking with one tone, like and not doing any rhythm at all would be like. And the thing is that like it's kind of silly, because if you listen to the dial-up motive sound, that is technically music. I mean, there's certainly some ways in which it's musical. I listen to it because I'm autistic enough that it calls me down. But you know, like I listen to the slowed down by like 700%, and people are like, this is scary, blah blah blah. And I'm like, yeah, I'll like close my eyes and listen to this on repeat for like a couple minutes. I'm like, it's like the angels singing to me.
You just
and I'm
start
like, well, maybe I'm a
chanting.
robot.
You just start chanting in Sanskrit while it's going, and you just feel better, or something like that.
Yeah, very, very occult of me. But basically, you know, so you know, the point being is that Tolkien really is. It's not just that he is kind of riffing off of the general Western themes. It actually, he is pointing out a very, very important, deep point that even physics has kind of come upon. Like, I mean,
so Elliott, are you saying that he knows what he's Tolkien about?
Oh goodness, Lord! You know, and it's only 50 people listen to this anyway. So good job for you. 50.
We've lost 49 of them. Yeah. Hi, Mom. Exactly. Yeah. Thank you for liking. Exactly.
Yeah, it goes through and it puts on the background, mutes it. It's like, oh, talking about mute.
Mute. Yeah.
But,
yeah.
Well, keep listening, but I will listen with my ears. But Tolkien does this really, really.
Honey, but I refuse to hear these jokes anymore. Yeah.
Exactly. Your roommates are all like, oh my God, I already heard this in person. I don't need to hear this again. But no, but he hits on something really, really deep here, which is that like music, and harmonious music in particular, being sort of different embodiments of themes, or of parts of the mind, air quote, of Ilúvatar, right? Sort of projected out into his immediate quote unquote surroundings, whatever that means in this case, right? Creates this sort of, so this is, it's interesting. So the first part is them figuring out how to sing, right? Okay, so then they figure out how to sing, and then he declares to them a mighty theme, right? Unfolding to them things greater, more wonderful than he had yet revealed, right? And so they're singing along, and they're like, damn, this is fucking dope. Right?
Not a direct quote, but yes.
Elliott
in the parlance of our time. Yeah,
exactly, right. You know, and let's see, blah blah blah, stuff, and it's so powerful that it starts to kind of fill in the void around them, which very much is the case if you have some really compelling music. It does fill the void within you and around you and around the people. It's pretty great, right?
I mean, again, this just shows you how freaking Lutheran I am. I think of like, you know, I think of Reformation Sunday, Mighty Fortress on the organ, right? And it's just like they turned it up to 11 because Lutherans, and it's like it's our hymn that we really like. But yeah, no, like I always think of that, like it fills the entire church, and it is like, dude, and there's no space There's no space inside that space that's not touched by that music. So I know what you mean. That's
Well,
yeah.
and it's funny that you keep using the word resonate over and over again, because like literally resonance is
Yeah.
Every object has a frequency, right? At which, when a force is applied to it at that frequency, it will start to absorb more energy that it dissipates, right? So the example is a car, right? If I don't have the e-brake on and I put a car in neutral, you could push the car and it kind of pushes back because there's springs and it kind of lets you push a little bit, but you can't really get the car moving just by one push, right? You cannot give enough force. But if you push a little bit, it's really easy to push the car. And if you find the right rhythm, so you're like push, 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 and you make sure when you push it forward and you let go and you let it rock all the way back and don't push it as it's rocking towards you, and then you wait till it stops and then you push again when it would naturally start bouncing back and forth in front of you. If you only pushes it when it starts bouncing away from you, you're only ever adding energy to the car. And that means that over time it will start to move in that direction. Right. So that is what resonant frequency is, right? When you see the lady sing real high and break the wine glass, exactly the same physical process. She is pushing that glass at the right frequency, and it soaks up all that energy. It starts vibrating to the point where it breaks, and that frequency that the lady sings at is the resonant frequency. And that's what you start seeing here, is basically they're resonating kind of at the frequency of the void, so to speak, right? And they're filling the void with their beautiful song, right? So anyway, that's kind of
No, and no, very, very well said, beautifully said. As we've talked about, as Tolkien was very adamant about too, you can't really have humans can't understand a story without a sense of danger, evil. We're so programmed by our world around us. You need to have struggle. There's some potential Theodoric, if you know what I mean, resonances here. It's almost like humans need to have struggle. We don't understand a world that is
yes, Theodoric, correct.
Yeah.
Yes, sorry.
There's and there's Theodoric the Goth. No, the other one. There's humans have
actually
we have a hard time,
though. What's the difference?
What's the difference actually? No, but like humans, it's like impossible to make a story that makes a whole lot of sense to us where everything's perfect, because we don't know what that's like, right? That's never been, maybe if you're people of faith, you have glimpses of that, but you haven't lived it in its full embodiment yet. And so there's a fall, right? You kind of need a fall. You need to have something go wrong in order to explain, well, why is the world of Middle Earth is not a perfect world. It's a beautiful world, but it's not perfect. There is evil, there is hurt, there is death, there is all these things, there's sickness. You have to kind of account for that. And the inception of that is with discord, like bad chords.
Mm-hmm.
Like wrong harmonies,
dissonance as opposed to consonance, right? Interesting. Dissonance.
And so Melkor who's one of the highest Ainur, one of the strongest,
the smartest
decides that, and I love how Tolkien in a couple places it says that in the beginning Melkor told himself it was out of love of Ilúvatar that he wanted this. He he first lies to himself. So if you want to think about, if you haven't figured it out, Melkor is sort of not a one-to-one, because we don't like allegory, but there's a mythic similarity to Satan in the Christian creation theology story. Melkor lies to himself first, saying, well, I just want to do more. I want to do more for Ilúvatar. But the problem is that he's not doing it in harmony with Ilúvatar's theme. It's not that Ilúvatar says, all you little Ainur have to be just like I say. I mean, let's be honest, all right? Let's tell it to you straight. Tolkien was Catholic, not Calvinist. But okay, that's a dig on Calvinists. If you're Calvinists, we love you, but yeah. but
Well,
they're
but
not
only
little,
because we have to.
only, yes, because we're commanded
I
to.
hate Calvinists.
The Ainur are not
Calvinists.
automatons, right? They're not little. They're not little like golems running around. Not golem, but golems running around just like robot Robbie the Robot, right, from Forbidden Planet. They're not like that. They have their own identity. They have their own sense of self. They have their own talents, right? They have their own being. But the idea is, well, you're going to go do those things and be creative in like the literal sense, in harmony with what Ilúvatar is his mighty theme. But Melkor lies to himself first and says, well, it's fine. It's okay, right? Self-justification. It's fine because I'm just doing it to expand. But it quickly becomes clear that Melkor just wants to expand the theme, his own theme, just for like his own sense of self-aggrandizement, but also for dominion and for desire for dominion over others, and that kind of stuff. So Melkor quickly it becomes pretty clear that Melkor doesn't it's for him. It's no longer for Ilúvatar. And that's it's like a problem, I would say. And so there's a couple times, well, this is sort of an ongoing cycle, right? Is that Melkor introduces something new and it doesn't harmonize and it throws all of the other Ainur off. It's not just like Melkor's having a hard time singing today, right? The choir master takes Melkor over and is like, let's work on your scales, or I don't know how, I don't sing, but I'm assuming this is something like that people do, right? Elliott can speak to this more than I can. It's not just like Melkor's having an off day. It's like Melkor is purposely introducing themes that throw everyone else off and make him look, I guess, in his mind, great. But all it really does is just make a huge ton of discordant noise.
And actually there's just such a and you're totally right. So here's the thing. I'll give you a little bit of actually behind the scenes choir.
Okay, yeah, because you know the choir stuff in a way that I never will. So
right. So this is a little bit of an open. This is a little bit of a secret even within choir member people. But some choir directors have this notion of what we might call solo voices and sponge voices, right? Sometimes they're called flutes and oboes, right? And somebody who has a sponge voice might be quite offended to find out that they're called a sponge voice. But this is what's meant. Some people's voices by nature aren't necessarily bad, but think about somebody who's more of a musical theater voice, right? Like I don't mean to necessarily sing here, but it's really hard to, it's sort of like if you think about just any like Broadway play, not like My Fair Lady type of thing, but more of a Broadway style where they're like more likely to be nasally and they'll hold the note and it'll go a little bit flat. Like that person's very controlled. They know exactly what they're doing. They mean to do all that stuff. It's not a lack of skill. They're choosing to sound a little bit discordant. That is more of the oboe or the soloist voice that I'm talking about, right? It does not blend well. There's other voices that are kind of like, a little bit more of like a softer, right? Maybe, or the way that they pronounce their vowels might be a little bit less nasally or whatever. Those voices tend to, when they're standing next to solo voices, kind of chill the solo voices out and allow the rest of the choir to blend as if they're singing in one voice. That's why choirs kind of sound like one kind of funky voice as opposed to 200 people, or not really 200, but 40 to 60 people all singing together, is because they're able to blend. They are listening to the person on their right and their left, and they are trying to sound like their partner, right? Their singing partners around them. And so anyway, this is why a choir sounds great. Now, Melkor wasn't just somebody. Now, occasionally, especially there's some examples that I could give where one person is shouting, they're not singing, right? And you can kind of hear that one guy who is really into the music, but gosh, bless his heart, and I am usually this guy, to be fair. You can hear him, right? And he is definitely singing. He's singing the right notes, but he's not blending well, right? That's not even what Melkor was doing, right? Melkor,
it wasn't well intentioned, right? It wasn't well intentioned over enthusiasm is what I was trying.
He wanted to sing a whole ass different song. That's the problem, right? So everybody else is singing America the Beautiful, and he is like, well, I'm gonna sing the national anthem, right? The Oh Say Can You See song, right? And that does not sound good in general. That sounds real bad.
We'll do some more cringe right-wing live reading. No, there's just, I wrote a couple quotes down here that I thought were like emblematic of the problem. So quote, and it seemed at last that there were two musics progressing at one time before the seat of Ilúvatar, and they were utterly at variance, unquote. So they're not, there's like utterly, not even partially off, they're like completely off. I'm not musically talented enough to even, I'm trying to think of an example of what this would be like, how you would even replicate that in human music.
Actually, I have a literal example of this. There's a dude who is, and again, you can see like it's you don't even need a fucking template for this. It just pops out at you in reality, right? Where there's this composer, 20th century composer, right, which should set off huge alarm bells. If it happened in art in the 20th century, it probably was a fucking mistake. But anyway, this guy named, I think it's Yeats, who took two marching bands, started them out playing wildly different pieces of music, and then had the marching bands march through each other. And musically speaking, this is a fantastic exercise. It requires great discipline. It requires it's an interesting feat. Musically speaking, it's a goddamn train wreck, right? And this is what happens. It sounds like there's two musics going on. Now, the thing is that, okay, you could be like, Elliott, two musics doesn't always sound bad, though. Look at Bach, right? He has a fugue is like a melody and then a counter melody playing at the same time. And they're literally two different melodies, right? So, that could, no, these are utterly at discord. We're talking heavy metal and fucking, jazz. Doesn't sound good together.
Both of which are great.
I don't care how you try to make yes. Together, no, they're not great.
There's I could think of some prog metal that actually has some jazz influence, but even then it's not like
that's true.
Not like a jazz song being played on top of a metal song. That's just
a metal song, right?
Even those prog metal examples, it doesn't really it doesn't work. Yeah, because
100%.
Metal is not discord. Metal is actually insanely
coordinate,
like regimented. Like you have to be really just listen to Meshuggah. Like that takes a lot of talent to play. Even if you don't like the music,
I don't enjoy listening to metal, but it is the cutting edge of music right now. I'm just gonna put it out right there. And metal drumming is literally the best drumming, hands down. Period. And there's some metal songs I wish they would take out the screamy vocals and like the way too much guitar stuff, and I could just listen to basically just the drum, because it's like, holy shit, they're playing like it's ridiculous.
This is turning into two people talking about what music they like, but it's okay. It's the music of the Ainur. Elliott, I would really I'm going to send you some. You might really like post metal, because post metal doesn't have often
post everything, Colin.
It's post. It's so pomo. No,
I like it because it's post.
I like it because it's post. Yes. No, but post metal oftentimes, but not always, but oftentimes, at least the bands I'm thinking of, doesn't have screaming. So it has a lot of metal going on, but it's far more like symphonic, I guess. Or I don't even know. With your medical,
I probably will like this.
You with your musical, not medical, shows you where my brain's at. We again with the family emergency this past week. It's just been the aftermath of a heart attack. So apologies. With your musical background, I would be very interested to see what you think about it. But yeah, that's a we'll hash that out in the chats.
No, for sure. So let's suppose so Melkor is
big time discord, and so Ilúvatar has to kind of reset. Well, not reset. He has to but he has to really take control again.
And so basically he tells everybody to stop.
Right? Yeah, if I may read.
Yeah. Go ahead. From the book.
In one chord, deeper than the abyss, dude, higher than the firmament. This is like Milton level prose here, or almost poetry here. Yeah. So in one chord, deeper than the abyss, higher than the firmament, piercing as the light of the eye of Ilúvatar, the music ceased. So the music stops, and they've been playing, or they've been creating music, singing up until this point. And this is before time really exists, in at least in the way that the mortal or elven characters of the world understand it. So who knows how long that really was, even if you could even reckon that. But now there's just no more music, because it got to the point where you just literally, Melkor's dissonance was so bad that everyone's so thrown off that like everything breaks down. It's obviously nothing. This is like a supernatural level of bad music, but I mean, as a non-singer person myself, I can tell you that there's been some times, like in recent weeks at church, where somebody got thrown off because, and every single person, have you ever had this happen? Every single person like gets thrown off, including like the music director who's playing. Yep. Like, yep. And then it's like everyone's off, and everyone knows that they're off, but even the musically, like the actual professional musicians in the church, they can't get everyone on board, because it's the congregation is singing and we're not the choir. And so even the most talented can't reset it. And everyone who's like the normies, like me, is like, this is clearly wrong. I don't know why, but maybe I just stopped singing because something's gone wrong with somebody missed a cue, and it was like a cascading domino effect. I'm certain with all your choir background you've had in practice.
It happens all the time. It happens, especially during practice, especially when people are tired, because what'll happen a lot of times is there's usually a funky counter melody or whatever, right? Or what'll most frequently happen is soloist one is supposed to come in, fumbles the coming in. That was a cue for soloist two to come in, and now they don't know their notes, so they fuck it up, and then everybody is just like, okay, like, or somebody sings a wrong note, and that kind of, there's a lot of different ways in which, like, yeah, exactly, like professional musicians, you can't help that shit, because choirs are not about the professional musicians. Professional musicians are kind of like the team leaders, maybe, right? Yeah. But it's about everybody in the choir, again, having the same mind, and so that's what's really interesting, again, about singing, and singing that's done at the level that requires focus from everybody. So when everybody is singing at their best, which is not always going to be the same, but when everybody's fully invested in the music and singing their heart out, like, everybody really genuinely is of one mind at that moment. They're of one spirit, or one breath, one pneuma at that moment, right? Along with the initiator of these things, who is the conductor, the director, right? And if one person stumbles, and that kind of gets everybody off track, then everybody's all over the place, right? And we're no longer of one mind on one theme, right? So it's not even crazy, right? Like, I mean, you give an example that is totally relatable to at least churchgoers anyway, right? And that's true for this too, right? For this, for Tolkien's creation myth, right?
Yep. Yeah, and so Ilúvatar has to kind of like, well, again, not reset, but a new theme. Going to wrap it up into a new theme, and he's been doing this up to this point, right? That Melkor keeps introducing something new that's not in line, and it keeps getting wrapped up into a bigger, broader, cooler, more awesome, more beautiful, also more sad simultaneously, such as it's so is it when you be and before the throne of Ilúvatar, there's this like awe and very biblical language here. Melkor keeps trying to mess stuff up. Ilúvatar keeps showing him, keeps trying to reset him, like hint, hint, nudge, nudge. You need to stop doing this, because look at what I'm doing with what you're doing. You're trying to mess it up, and I'm making it better. You're trying to mess it up, and I'm making it better. It just keeps getting made better. And so it gets to this point where he has to reset it with this one chord. And I'm even trying to
think about like this.
that would be like a human chord that would be equivalent of like so deep and high and it just resets everything. And
so you need to think about it like what Ilúvatar did is, if you've heard of as somebody just kind of putting both arms like elbow to elbow on a piano, that's what he did. He just like boom, he's like, shut the fuck up, everyone, we're starting again.
Well,
like,
and this is a cool thing too, because for a large part of a lot of the dialogue, not all of the dialogue in the Silmarillion has the same style. So Tolkien changes his style based on what section of or what part of his creation myth that he's telling. But this is very much in the beginning, and so he just leans into the King James. I mean, despite being Catholic, very Catholic, he's still very English. And so what is one of the most foundational books in modern English is the King James Bible, and other roughly contemporaneous works such as Milton. And so you get some cool KJV vibes here. And I actually like the King James version, so big surprise. So Ilúvatar says, I'll do another cringe live reading, apologies. We don't tend to do that on this channel, but this is good, and I think it's worthy to be read. So and thou, Melkor, shalt see that no theme may be played that hath not its uttermost source in me, nor can any alter the music in my despite. For he that attempteth this shall prove but mine instrument in the devising of things more wonderful, which he himself hath not imagined. And so this is also a theme that is carried throughout Tolkien's works, particularly in the Lord of the Rings. Particularly in a lot of the scenes in Lord of the Rings, the books, also the movies, but really in the books, between Frodo and Sam, and then plus Gollum, with the temptation of and the weariness of getting the ring to Mordor. That there's despite all of there's this real sort of, there's the temptation to despair, the temptation to just swallow the black pill completely, and to think, well, how could any good come out of this horrific situation we find ourselves in? But usually in the voice of Sam, because Sam is the real hero, everyone, it's that, this is horrific right now, but it will be a passing shadow. This will move away. And in the voice of others too, like Gandalf and many others, that this is horrific and bad, but evil, despite being so bad, is ultimately hollow and is the perverted good. And the good has this tendency, not it doesn't always happen as neat and tidy as anyone would like. You're still gonna die. There's still bad things. Bad things will still happen to you. You will probably still do some bad things. But good has this strong tendency, this pull of wrapping things back up into itself, into something greater. And that is just everywhere in Tolkien's works. And anyone who's read Lord of the Rings, or even just The Hobbit, but particularly Lord of the Rings, the theme is so strong. And at the inception of the story, it's explicitly laid out by the creating deity of the world. So it's
it's pretty. So I've been meditating on this throughout the podcast to try to really tie this together. And Melkor is really a tragic figure in a lot of ways, because he is the best, right? And he wants to be better.
Also very similar to Satan in Paradise Lost.
Yes, 100%.
It's
right.
Clear that Tolkien has some Milton. It's clear he's well-educated English professor. He's read Milton. Yeah. So
no, absolutely,
yeah,
right.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
he is the best, and he wants to be better, right? He wants to engage in what our friend, our dear, we have to come up with the full Latin name, by the way, Unculus Theodorus, right?
Unculus Theodorus, yeah.
Yeah, Unculus Theodorus, e pluribus unum or whatever, right?
Ergo te dissolvo, yeah. Anyhow.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Point being is that I really hope that somebody has. I'll start chanting that shit. That's great. Anyway, point being is that he points out about the power process, right? And Melkor is also falling to the power process of he is setting a goal and trying to achieve it. And it is sad, because the kind of only way that he can really achieve this goal is by fitting in and not being great on his own.
but it's interesting because Ilúvatar was the one. He was already the best and unbestable. So he's at the very, very top, right? There's no way he could get any better, right? But what he chooses to do is to kind of the only way that he could find any way to improve upon his situation was to share the situation, right? So it was to it was to it was to divide, so to speak, himself into multiple subconsciousnesses, and teach them what he was dealing with, right? Like what his deal was, and I don't, we're not really given a way in which it's not like Melkor failed a task. It's not like they gave him you know what I mean? Like it's
I
not
think I
like
know
he
what you mean.
failed. It's like he wanted to be better, but he kind of failed to see that the only way to be better would be to do something along the lines that Ilúvatar did. So Ilúvatar tried to. Here's the thing: he tried to improve his situation by creating other beings and sharing beauty with them, right? Sharing the themes that were on his mind. Melkor, and so his motivation was imparting the beauty of the thoughts that he had with other people, fundamentally creative endeavor. Melkor's was sort of, I bet I could be better, right? And there's a lot in our current society that's like that, right? Like, they say that the immaturity of certain science or engineering situations is when the first thing is can I do that better, right?
Yeah.
Or anything you can do, I can do better, right? Like, and when you're motivated like that, you probably will get better, but where will you end up? You actually don't know.
It's
it could get pretty dark.
It's Ian Malcolm from Jurassic Park. You spent so long trying to figure out if you could do how to do the thing, you never stopped to ask whether you should do it, right? Like,
and that's exactly what I'm getting at, right?
Yeah.
So
Well,
yeah.
and this also ties back in. We kind of skirted the issue because it's so hard to compress any small snippet of Tolkien into a relatively decently sized episode is hard because it's just so much. But when we're talking about Saruman, right? Saruman has this kind of scientism quality to him, where like he just cares about what he can do, not what he should do. And you can see this theme starting here at the very beginning, that Saruman's fall is a much smaller fall because he had less to fall, but still a significant fall, and it mirrors, or it disharmonizes with the disharmony of Melkor, because it's the same idea that you lose your sense of purpose, and you have the same drives, which maybe originally weren't bad, right? Just like Saruman originally probably, Gandalf says, probably convinced himself in the beginning that he, or as Treebeard says, right, that I believe it's Treebeard, that somebody will correct me, that Saruman started out just thinking, it's just harmless, it's fine, I just want to know just to know. But it quickly became, I just want to know to do, never stopping to think, well, what is my purpose as a wizard, right? And so that's obviously much lower down in the tree of being than one of the greatest of the Ainur. But it's the same idea of you refuse to accept that the greatest fulfillment of your power and the greatest joy you could experience is found within the structure of Ilúvatar, because it's literally what you were created for. Like, that's your literal, you're fulfilling your purpose. And so this is my reading, so I'm only speaking for myself. Feel free to disagree, Elliott. I don't think it's that, Melkor wanted to improve himself and therefore was punished. I think it's that Melkor like chose to forget what his flourishing would look like, and said, I don't want that. I want this other stuff. I would rather be miserable, right? I would rather rule in hell, something like that, right? because I'd rather be miserable and it be me, which is, obviously, clearly, this is despite Tolkien doing his own myth creation here. It's clearly this is a very Christian story. It's a very Catholic story too, particularly in this view of evil and of fall. So, but yeah,
I don't.
It's not
I wouldn't.
I don't think it's that Melkor's punished for being better. It's that he's not even necessarily punished directly. He's like he's punished by his own sin, if you will. Like he's punished by, I think that's Dostoevsky, right? You're punished by our sins. That he's punished by taking him free from that. That to break out of the eternal structure of Ilúvatar is to suffer, because you're completely out of whack. You're not in harmony.
And by punished, exactly. I'm not saying that it's sort of a sentence being meted upon him. More, I'm just saying, like, so it's interesting, right? Because if we go back to his origination, right? It's kind of fascinating because these Ainur are kind of little bits of the mind of Ilúvatar, right? So Melkor is that little bit of the mind of God, we'll just say it, that is sort of narcissistic in a certain element, right? It's sort of the highest intellect, or like the most self-important version. And when that is harmonious within the mind of God, there's no problem. When it's harmonious outside the mind of God, there's no problem. But when that sort of self-aggrandizing or self-conscious or self-aware part starts to break away from the rest of everything, that's where the inner discord and the inner suffering starts to happen, where one version of this within yourself is, why aren't I better, right? Like, I could be so much better, right? Or, oh my goodness, like, I'm just so terrible, right? Or, I have all these stupid thoughts that I hate, or whatever, like all these things, like, that's kind of how, that's one way in which I see Melkor, right? So I wouldn't say this is the capital T way to see him, right? I'd just say, like, that's another kind of interpretation that I like.
Like any good myth, there's many possible interpretations happening here simultaneously.
For sure.
I see this connected to I mean, considering they were good friends at least for most of their life. Really sadly, at the end, I think my understanding is there was some falling out, but between Tolkien and Lewis, obviously part of the Inklings sharing a lot of ideas and work with each other. Lewis talks about the temptation of the inner circle, right? That the when you're intellectually active, which is not a bad thing, you need to be careful that you don't kind of, well, it's the same trap that Saruman falls into, that I'm so smart, I'm so good, I'm going to hang out, and I desperately want to be with those special people in the special inner circle, and everyone else is just not good enough for me, right? I'm gonna, and so there's this temptation, obviously that's on a human level, but that's the temptation that Melkor falls prey to, because he wants to create his own inner circle, really starting out just as him, and then he realizes, spoiler, that he's not enough. Because he's not enough, he needs Ilúvatar. And so, just in a way that mirrors the Christian story, he draws certain of the Ainur away from Ilúvatar and sort of the renegade angels, if you will, and that way they can all be miserable together. So anyhow, yeah, Elliott, thanks so much for showing up. I know you got to head out here. Everyone, please like, comment, subscribe, all the things, more to come. And have a great Good Friday. Have a great Holy Saturday, and have a very, very blessed Easter if you do Easter things. And if you do Passover things, I hope you have a great continuation of the Passover holiday. And even if you don't do those specific things, at least we're up in our neck of the woods, spring is finally springing. And so please enjoy the spring and do some nice spring things, and try not to sneeze too bad from all the incipient allergies that are now assaulting our nasal passages. Cool. All right. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great weekend. Peace.